Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank everyone for being here today. My name is Armida.
I'm Karen.
I'm Ali.
I'm Ahmad.
And we are Team A. We are going to be presenting Weiner's Chapter 5. So today, before we start, I just wanted to touch on a few main points. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is first impressions. Then we're going to discuss some tips on how to present yourself, and lastly, how to design your presentation. Now I'm going to be passing it on to Karen, who's going to be talking a little bit more about looking composed.
Thank you. So I'll be talking about looking composed, and the first thing is talking about touch. So that kind of goes towards your handshake. So for example, when you go to meet someone, a handshake can really kind of be the first impression they get from you. So if you go and you kind of give them a nice firm handshake, they'll be able to tell that you're coming in already confident. And then if you kind of give them a weak one, they're going to be like, okay, they're a little bit insecure. So you want to make sure that when you go in, it's a nice, little grip and firm. You don't want to be squeezing their hand either. Another thing is you want to be kind of mindful of how long you're taking when you shake their hand, because the longer you take, at that point you're not shaking hands anymore, you're holding each other's hands. So you want to be mindful of that. Next thing is time. So do you control time, or is time controlling you? So for example, if you meet someone or you work with someone and you're constantly hearing them say, oh, I'm late to this meeting, or oh, I'm late, and you're constantly hearing that, your impression's going to be like, did they even manage their time correctly? So you want to make sure that you're managing your time, that time isn't controlling you, and that you're on top of that. So another thing would be fast talkers. So I don't know about you guys, but I've had times where I've heard someone talk really fast, and at some point I'm not even paying attention to what they're saying, because then I start thinking, did they breathe? Because they're just going so fast and they're so rushed. So it's like making sure that you're using your time wisely when you are talking. Last thing is your facial expression. So your body language can say a lot. In the book, it did say, try to move your eyebrows. That was something new, but it kind of relates. So when you are trying to emphasize something, the first thing you do is you kind of like move your eyes, make them wider when you're trying to make a point. So making sure that you are using your facial expressions. If you're trying to talk about something exciting and kind of trying to relate that to people, you don't want to be talking and then you're kind of just, dull. They're not going to really be paying attention at that point. So that kind of goes to this last quote here. If you're feeling good, tell your face. And from here, I'll pass it back to Armita.
Thank you, Karen. So now I'm going to be adding on a little bit to the whole looking composed portion of the chapter. First, I'm going to be speaking a little bit about your body movements and how important that is. There are many different situations in which our body movements can be observed. People are always watching you and are always assessing your credibility, so it's very important to keep in mind how you're moving your body. Any added movement, any jerky movements, any touching of your hands and like rubbing your arms and thighs, like that will indicate that you're losing composure. Next, I'm going to be speaking about the way you decorate your space. So for example, if your office is extremely messy and cluttered, obviously your coworkers and your employers are going to think that you're just a messy person overall. And the things that you have in your office are very important because it does say a lot about the kind of person that you are. Lastly, I'm going to be discussing how important the way you dress and groom yourself actually is. Dress rules are not always clear, which makes it very difficult to understand how to dress appropriately for certain situations. Some people believe that dressing and grooming yourself isn't really important in getting a job because they think that your ability to work should be the only thing that you should focus on. However, that's not always the case because no one's going to hire you if you're not hygienic and clean and just look well-dressed overall. So in this chapter, there was a story called The Case of the Hairy Lady. So there is a woman named Ellen, and she's very sophisticated, very smart, has her MBA, but unfortunately she'd been passed up for a job offer around 3 times for the same one. And the narrator went and spoke to Ellen's boss, asking why she was passed up for this position. And Ellen's boss goes on to say, I can't really tell you. Maybe if you go see, you can spot the issue yourself. And so the narrator meets with Ellen, and he's kind of confused because she seems to be a well-rounded person. There's nothing really wrong. He doesn't spot anything from the beginning. But as soon as Ellen stands up, he notices that her legs were really hairy. And so he politely mentions to her that, hey, you know, maybe the reason you're being passed up for this job is because your legs are hairy. You might want to think about maybe shaving or just wearing slacks every day to work. And Ellen took it very politely. She wasn't offended at all, but she ended up taking the advice, and she was promoted 2 months later to the job that she wanted. So basically, in conclusion to my part, is that there is a message in everything that we do, so you always have to be careful because there's no way that you're not communicating even when you think that you aren't. And now I'm going to be passing it on to Ali.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to basically presentational speaking, some sort of presentational tips. So the main thing that the book mentioned was keeping eye contact with your audience. And if you're not comfortable with keeping eye contact, I think you should run this for our quiz. But the last 4, so if I'm going to go over, keep eye contact with your audience, keeps them included. So the book basically mentioned that if you want to keep emphasis on some sort of on the PowerPoint or some sort of bulleted point, you gotta make it look back at them. And then another thing was it's all about the time that you do it in. So like I said, the last 4 in the sentence usually do the trick. And then presentation movement. Another thing that it said was be a tree. So stable body, stable ground. But you can move your arms, you can move your limbs like a tree. Like when the wind blows, the branches are moving around. And then your tone of voice. You have to be passionate about how you speak, and if you're really enjoying what you're talking about. Otherwise, if I'm talking really monotone, looking down, looking away, you're not really gonna be engaged in the presentation. If I was looking at the wall, keep eye contact. You're not really gonna be paying attention to me. You're gonna be paying what's this guy doing? So that's kind of the main key points of presentational speaking. I'm gonna move it on to Ahmad, who's gonna kind of piggyback off of it.
All right, guys. So I'm gonna be talking about how to design your presentation. First thing you want to keep in mind is a lot of people, whenever it comes to brainstorming, whenever you're thinking about what you're going to put on your presentation, you want to keep in mind what are people going to look at. What are the things that are going to grab the attention of people on your presentation? So you want to avoid the robot presentation. And what that means is you want to, first of all, you want to talk to the people directly without having just to read off of the slides. You want to explain through every point. And this is probably something that marketing majors will probably be more familiar with. But whenever you're designing billboards or anything that grabs people's attention, you're gonna be thinking about what is gonna grab their attention and what's gonna keep and resonate in their minds. Especially when we're talking about a product. Let's say there's a celebrity and you're gonna put their face into billboard. You want to have the product as close to their face as they can. That way they associate the celebrity with that product. That way it would resonate in their head. The second point is sometimes there's too much material on the slide, and in order to avoid that, you want to talk about different views. This is a little chart that shows the kind of views. I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with the high view, low view, and the kind of tactical view, so which comes to upper management, that's strategical view. Middle management is going to be more tactical, and the lower management is going to be more for the operational side. So you want to kind of pick and choose what details you put on your presentation. And then if you're going to put more than 10 points, you want to highlight the top 3 points that you're going to want them to focus on. That way they don't lose attention, and that way they're still tuned in. Also, you want to take your time to explain. You don't want to just read off the presentation or the slides. You want to actually go into depth into each point and explain why each point is important, and especially these top 3 points. Moving on. And then a final thought about PowerPoints. A lot of people misuse PowerPoint, especially the slides. Do not put reveal animation, guys. That's kind of considered immature. And whenever you think about it, if you're watching a slide that starts off with an empty page, and then you see the first animation comes up with a really small font, you're like, oh God, how long is this gonna take? I wanna get out of here. So you kinda wanna keep that in mind. It's better to lay off everything at first, and, you know, animation, that's probably good for maybe high school, not for people that are going to companies and to finishing up college. Also think about visual aids. So whenever thinking about visual aids, you wanna talk about things that cannot be explained with words, things that are better illustrated rather than spoken about. You can't really go to a church meeting or a Congress meeting that you're gonna see a lot of presentations. That's just doesn't happen, because they're gonna be talking about things they're not gonna really illustrate. Where if you're going to like an engineering meeting, you're gonna see a lot of flow charts, you're gonna see blueprints that are gonna be a better illustration for what the final point that they're trying to make. And finally, to the conclusion, what we talked about right now, looking composed help obtain a better and executive presentation. Some call it presidential demeanor. Well, probably not this president, but the one before. Proper speaking and minimal movements. You want to make sure that you take on the audience and take the stage and be in control. And then finally, the design of your presentation is crucial. It's gonna make your audience either tune in or kind of sway away with their focus and start thinking about what they're gonna have for lunch. All right, guys, with that, do you guys have any questions?